On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, a man stops to help a woman in need, changing a flat tire on the side of the road, an act of kindness he often does without much thought. But this time, something unexpected awaits. The next morning, a black SUV shows up at his door, a sign that a series of extraordinary events will soon change his life forever. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories to Heal. Today, I am happy to share a new story with you. Don't forget to subscribe and watch to the end. Rick's life has never been easy. Since childhood, he grew up in an environment full of suffering. His parents were poor examples of affection, often physically hurting and verbally abusing Rick for the smallest of reasons. At the age of 9, Rick finally ran away from home, hoping to find a better life out there. However, the reality was not as good as he imagined. He had to live with a foster family who did not give him enough attention. This situation pushed Rick further away from the right path. As a teenager, without parents to care for him, he fell into the world of drugs and struggled with an addiction that destroyed his life. Years later, after a long struggle to get clean, Rick faced the bitter reality that his family was gone, his marriage was broken, and he had lost his dream job. As if there was no way out, Rick finally accepted his fate to live alone as an old man, spending his days in a small pizza shop on the outskirts of town. The job gave him enough money to cover his daily needs, but not much. The income that Rick earned was just enough to survive, with no room to enjoy life. In addition, the only friend left in his life was his neighbor, Mr. Freeman, a kind man who was often a source of strength for Rick. Mr. Freeman was not only a friend, but also someone who was always there to provide emotional support, especially when Rick felt like giving up on life. The man who gave him the opportunity to work at the pizza shop and was always there to offer encouragement and words of wisdom during dark times. Despite having a friend like Mr. Freeman, Rick still felt lonely. He felt isolated even though he was surrounded by good people. Every night after work, Rick often made time to visit Mr. Freeman's home, seeking a little warmth from the loving little family. Their presence gave him a much-needed sense of acceptance. But one night, after working the night shift, as he was driving home in his old, rickety truck, something unexpected happened. In the middle of the drive, on a deserted and dark road, he saw a young woman standing next to her car, which appeared to be having tire problems. Without thinking, Rick immediately stopped his truck and approached the woman with a great desire to help. "Your tire is flat," Rick asked, his voice full of concern. The woman turned her head, looking frustrated. "Yeah, I think there's a nail stuck in it," she replied irritably as she tried to lift the car with a jack that seemed to be malfunctioning. Rick took pity on her and decided to help. Even though it was late at night and he was tired, he felt it was the right thing to do. Without saying much, Rick bent down and began changing the woman's tire. He understood that the woman might feel uncomfortable with his presence, especially in the middle of the quiet night. But he continued his work patiently. "Where are you from?" Rick asked as he busied himself with his work, trying to distract the woman so she would feel more comfortable in the silence that was beginning to weigh on her. The woman, who was scared and silent at first, started to open up. She began to tell him that she had just come home from hanging out with her friends. With a small smile, she continued that after driving for a while, she noticed that one of her car's tires was flat. With a slightly annoyed tone, she described the incident as a misfortune that came without warning. They continued to talk, though the woman did not reveal much more about herself. However, there was something about the way she spoke that made Rick feel like there was a deeper problem she was trying to hide. Rick could sense the burden that seemed to weigh on her, even through the small talk. Eventually, Rick couldn't help himself and began to tell her about himself. He opened up about his past life of regret, about how he had lost almost everything that was important to him because of a mistake he had made. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his chest. Rick felt relieved to be able to talk to someone other than Mr. Freeman, if only for a moment. The conversation brought him a small comfort that he had rarely felt lately. After several minutes of careful and painstaking work, the tire was finally replaced. With a broad smile on his face, Rick said sincerely, glad to help, before returning to his old, somewhat worn-out truck. With a light hand, he continued on his way home, satisfied that he had been able to help. The woman, who felt very helped, thanked him several times with a grateful expression on her face before finally continuing her journey in the car that was ready for use again. The next day, after completing his usual morning routine, Rick sat relaxed in his living room, enjoying a cup of warm coffee. The sunlight streaming through the window created a peaceful atmosphere, and he felt at peace with himself. Although his life was simple, he was proud to be able to help others in a sincere way. However, this happiness did not last long. Suddenly, there was a gentle knock on his door that disturbed his peace. Rick was surprised because there were no guests scheduled. With a feeling of curiosity, he got up and opened the door of his house. How surprised he was to see an expensively dressed man standing in front of him, followed by two other people who looked serious, and a black SUV parked in front of his house, adding to the strange feeling that enveloped the atmosphere. "Are you Rick?" the man asked in a serious tone. "Yes, I'm Rick. How can I help you?" replied Rick, confused. "I'm Gerald, and I'm here at my sister's request," the man explained, showing a photo of the woman Rick had helped last night. Rick was stunned to realize that the woman he had helped was this man's sister. Gerald continued, "My sister couldn't stop talking about you, how you helped her so sincerely. She said you reminded her of our late father. Did she get home okay?" Rick asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "Yes, she did. But what really impressed her wasn't just her trip home, but your kindness. She was so touched that she insisted on coming here to express her deep gratitude for what you did," Gerald replied sincerely. Gerald then took a white envelope from his pocket and handed it to Rick. As soon as Rick held the envelope in his hand, something felt different, something unusual. His curiosity got the better of him, and when he opened the envelope, his eyes widened in surprise. Inside was a large sum of money, much more than he had imagined. Rick firmly refused. "I was just helping a woman who had a tire problem. That is not something that should be repaid," he said carefully, trying to make it clear that his intentions were sincere. But Gerald remained adamant and did not change his mind. "This is Sarah's way of thanking you. Please don't refuse." "This is her last request, Rick," Gerald insisted, his eyes full of hope. With heavy emotions and hesitation, Rick finally accepted the envelope. As he opened his mouth to express his gratitude, tears streamed freely from his eyes. He felt as if the world had given him a second chance, a very meaningful gift after struggling in loneliness for so long. With a gentle smile, Gerald then revealed another piece of good news that made Rick pause for a moment. "Sarah also wants you to know that there is a job opening at the Golden Leaf Company, a big company that you have always dreamed of working for. I have already given you a recommendation, and they will be processing it soon," Gerald said with a broad smile. The news touched Rick. His life, which had been full of hardship for years, finally began to change. After a few months, Rick not only got the dream job he had always wanted, but he was able to buy a new house and move Mr. Freeman and his family in with him. They were all the family he had. Rick finally felt the happiness he had been searching for. The kindness he sincerely did for a woman in need changed not only his life, but the lives of those around him. And he learned that sometimes the kindness we give to others comes back to us in unexpected ways. As the saying goes, what we give to others will come back to us, but in a different and unexpected way. Like this story? Click like and subscribe for more stories, and share your thoughts with a word in the comment section.